Well, hello again from the Hall of History, and today we're going to take a look at the age of the American Railroad. Nice picture, black and white picture of the old steam locomotive here. The Iron Horse. The railroads definitely changed the American landscape forever, and we're going to take a brief look at that today. The Railroad Railway became a national phenomenon about 1869. May 10th, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed at Promontory Point, Utah. The driving of the Golden Spike. There was a race on between two different railroad companies, one coming out of California, Sacramento, and the other one coming out of Omaha. It's interesting, the one coming out of Sacramento, they had to go through the Sierra Nevadas, and it was very, very tough going through the mountains. But once this Transcontinental Railroad was completed, it pretty much knitted the country and changed the face of economy. You can now ship supplies back and forth from coast to coast. The movement of people. It brought the West closer to the East, if you will, connected all these rail lines in the East to the West, and within a few years, you even had a couple more transcontinental railroads being completed. What was the reality of the railroad? Well, and when they were working on it, you had the Irish and the Confederate veterans coming from out east, but you also had a large influx of cheap Chinese labor coming into San Francisco. And these Chinese people would work on the railroad, the Irish and Confederates, veterans work on the railroad. It was not an easy job. There was no OSHA. Injuries were frequent. They're using dynamite, pickaxes, shovels, carrying these ties, the rails. And as you can see here from some statistics, that 2,000 men and 20,000 men are injured in railroad construction annually. This was back-breaking labor. There's also racism. It was also present here. Minorities, you're looking again at the blacks and the Chinese, and were only paid $35 a month. They had to work 80 hours a week, whereas the whites were paid $45 a month, and they only had to work 50 hours a week. As these work camps moved along, camps showed up behind them, would sell, supplies and so forth. There were saloons, and these were really traveling towns, as you can well imagine, as these railroads were being built. It was also an interesting time period as the railroads were being built and were completed. You started had the railroad bank robbers, if you will. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid really come to mind if you've ever seen that movie. The trains would carry, they'd carry gold, they'd carry money, and it was quite the time period and kind of the lore and the myth of the American train robber, if you will. It was interesting to note that the railroads actually had a great effect on time. There was no way to really have a standardized time before this. There was Eastern time, and everybody pretty much kind of kept their own, to be honest with you. And so in 1883, the U.S. adopted 4 time zones, and each time zone is about 15 degrees in latitude, give or take. You can see from looking at this, it definitely kind of depend on state lines as you run through here. Mountain time here, some areas of Nebraska and Dakotas have more in common with the mountain west than they do with the prairie east, and so you see that split. But it's pretty much 15 degrees latitude, and there are 24 time zones that were then created for the world. And this standard time was adopted worldwide in 1919. Quite often you'll start hearing about Zulu time, military time, 24-hour time, and which is used. But Michigan, by the way, is an Eastern Standard Time, and railroads were, give them credit for this. They did have to have a way to standardize travel across the country. And again, the economy, business definitely influenced this. How did they change America? Well, every city where the train stopped would have a train station, and the larger cities and so forth, quite often it was Union Station. Just about no matter where you went in a larger city, it was Union Station. You had some of the larger railroads, such as the Union and the Pacific. Many of these towns we see here, Minneapolis, Seattle, and Denver, were all stops on the tracks. And as time went on, more and more people came out, businesses set up near the tracks, and it just sprouted into some of the largest cities in America, especially as you move out west. Chicago was a great stop for the railroads. They would bring the cattle in, the meat packing industry was in that, armor was in that area. When you get into there, and all these cattle would go in there, many of the cattle drives would get into Kansas and so forth, and load on the boxcars there and bring the beef out east to the markets. Definitely some of these areas created some of America's wealthy citizens. The railroad companies, they had a lot of land. If you ever go out west now, you see these railroad tracks go through, especially the Union Pacific. And the railroads at one time owned a vast majority of land out west. Well, what type of problems did the railroads encounter? Well, one was corruption. Farmers were overcharged. It was really cost more for a short haul, such as Chicago to Detroit, than from London to New York. They had the farmers, in the palm of their hand, and the railroads knew it, and they really just soaked the farmers up to ship their goods. Credit Mobilize was a company that raises railroad ticket prices and profits off the hikes. And this was a problem. They would buy these tickets, and they were kind of like scalpers, if you will. And this was a problem. The Granger laws, they attempted to end railroad discrimination and abuse. If you remember, the Grange we talked about a couple, 3, 4 days ago, and they wanted the railroads to stop really milking the farmers. If you excuse the pun there, but they really wanted to help the farmers stay in business. What ended up happening in 1887, the Interstate Commerce Act, the ICA, which is still in force today, really limited and regulated railroad business practices. Congress knew there was enough outcry from the public that these railroads were gouging people, and therefore Congress had to do something. The Panic of 1893 was a depression that also influenced the railroads and cut down some of their profits. Some of the other profits or problems that continued, as we mentioned, the Interstate Commerce Act and the whoops, I guess we already did this slide, so I guess we won't need this one. And that is the end of our recording.